What's good, everyone? So at the time of recording this video, I'm still quite under the weather, so disregard my raspy ass voice in this tutorial, but for this one I've got yet another sound design video and I've got a bunch of information about how you can modify and change your sound effects. So listen up. At this point, I've made 3 separate videos about sound design, mostly about how to choose the right sound effects for your videos and how to use them in a creative manner. But in today's video, I want to show you how you can take those sound effects you already have and change them, modify them a little bit to better fit the situation or the video you're working on. But before we get into that, I want to take a quick second to talk about where I get my sound effects in the first place, which is from Epidemic Sound. Epidemic is an online sound library with a ton of different sound effects as well as a bunch of different variations of the same sounds. It's a great resource, and especially for those of us making online videos, because they really embrace the online community. In fact, they even have a subscription just for YouTube creators. Epidemic is also where I get most of the music for my videos. It's great because there's a ton of different variety of the styles of music that you can find, but it's always easy for me to find what I'm looking for. It's also very helpful being able to download the individual tracks for the songs that you download. So if I wanted to add some more bass into the background music I'm using right now, or maybe cut the drums out entirely, I could do that. I've been using Epidemic for a few months now, and it's quickly become one of my favorite resources for creating my videos. And I do want to specify that they're not sponsoring this video or paying me to say anything, but I am an ambassador with Epidemic Sound, so if you use the link in the description to sign up for any of their products, I'll get, a little kickback from that. That being said, let's get into some ways that you can modify and enhance your sound effects. The first of which is by just layering up multiple sounds. I get that this is very simple, but it's also crucial because you're rarely gonna find one perfect sound effect for what you're looking for. Most of the time, you're gonna have to find different bits and pieces and put it together to make kind of a big composite sound that'll work in your video. You could also layer up just one sound in such a way that it's gonna sound kind of amplified or extended. For example, I have this sound effect of these water droplets, and I like the sound effect, it sounds right, but I just don't think that the sound is happening frequently enough to match the clip. Increasing the volume isn't gonna do anything to help with this, but what I can do instead is cut the sound effect at the end of the shot and then drag it to the layer below itself. Then I can keep doing that a few more times, layer up that sound effect, and if we play it back, we can hear that it sounds like there's more water droplets hitting the ground. This could also work for something like a crowd. So if you have that crowd noise sound effect, but it doesn't sound like there's enough people to match the actual scene that people are seeing, you can take that sound effect, cut it, drag it below itself, and then you've basically created the illusion that you have that sound effect of a crowd twice as large. Another technique that's slightly more complex than just layering up individual sound effects is to fade your sounds in and out. And this sounds really basic, but it's another really important technique for eliminating the harsh cuts between your shots. There are a couple different ways of doing this, the first of which is to use the fade effects found in your software's effects panel, and the one that I found to be the smoothest in Premiere is the exponential fade. You can also achieve a similar effect by using keyframes on the editor timeline, and this is good because it's going to give you just a little bit more control over what you're doing. Making your own keyframes is great because it allows you to use keyframe interpolation, where you're basically able to control how smooth, gradual, or exponential the transition between those keyframes is. If you want to have a sound effect over a transition where it's kind of building up slowly and then it gets really loud really fast at the peak of that transition, you can do that using keyframe interpolation. While we're on the topic of volume and keyframes, one kind of fun thing to do with your sound design is to adjust the right and left volume separately. This way, if someone's wearing headphones when they're watching your video, you can change whether they hear the sound on the right side, on the left side, somewhere in the middle, or even kind of moving from one side to the other. In addition to being kind of a fun gimmick, this can also be a pretty practical technique for your sound design. So if you have a shot of a car passing from right to left, you could keyframe that sound design as well so that your viewer hears the car moving from the right ear to the left. But of course, this is also great when it's used as a stylistic tool, so you could really catch your viewer off guard by placing that sound effect somewhere they wouldn't necessarily expect it to be. Moving on, one of my favorite techniques to use for my sound design is to change the speed of the sounds. Speed them up, slow them down, or reverse them. You could do that too. In most cases, if you slow a sound effect down, you're gonna make it sound larger and more powerful. So if you have the sound of a waterfall and you slow that down to 50%, it sounds like a larger, faster flowing waterfall. On the other side of that, if you take a sound effect and speed it up, it's probably gonna sound a bit faster and lighter. So if we have this whoosh sound effect and we speed it up to 200%, it's gonna go from sounding like a slow, heavy kind of sound effect to being more of just a quick, swipey motion. In some cases, changing the speed of a sound effect can even just change how it sounds entirely. For example, I use a lot of thunder sounds in my videos, but it's not actually a thunder sound effect. I do have like an actual thunder sound effect in my sound library, but for some reason one day I was just messing around with this sound of like a sheet flap sound effect. Basically, for whatever reason, I took that sound and I slowed it down to 20%, so 1/5 of the original speed, and it sounded even better than the actual thunder sound effects. I've been using that in my videos instead ever since then. Deadass, like any moody edit that you see in one of my videos is gonna have that sound effect in it. It's one of my favorite sound effects to use in my videos, and it's a tarp. And you don't have to just speed up or slow down your sound effects. You could even get really creative and reverse them. My favorite example of this is a gunshot sound effect. If you take a gunshot sound and you reverse it, it sounds like this really dramatic build up. And finally, let's talk about some filters that you can put on your audio to make them sound completely different. There's a bunch of these, but I'm just gonna talk about a couple of very important ones. The first of which is reverb. Reverb is basically just echo, and it's something we usually try to avoid when recording audio, but when it comes to mixing and doing sound design, it's oftentimes something that can be used stylistically to imply that your scene is taking place in a large open space. Another filter that I make pretty frequent use of is a low pass filter. This is kind of similar to a bass boost, except instead of bringing up the bass, you're cutting out everything else. Cutting out those higher frequencies makes it to where your viewer hears just the bass of your audio. This makes it sound like you're underwater or underground, or just distant from the action. When you watch those videos on YouTube of popular music but edited in a way that it sounds like you're inside of the bathroom at a party, this is the effect they're using to do that. This is also something that I use for my background music. So if the background music I'm using is just a little bit too pronounced, it's competing too much with my voice, I might slap a low pass filter on it, and that'll kind of cut out those high pronounced frequencies, make it to where it kind of sinks into the background a bit more and doesn't compete with my voice. This is especially useful for a time like right now where I'm quite ill and pretty much anything can compete with my weak ass sick voice. The low pass effect is generally created by using an equalization adjustment, which basically just allows you to control the volume of the different pitches of your audio. This is a more pronounced way to use it, but you can also use equalization in a bit more of a subtle manner. For example, to kind of enhance your voice on camera. And I actually made a separate video all about how to do that this Wednesday, a few days ago. So if you want to learn some more about that, you can click right up here to watch that. And you might want to go watch that video because this is all the information I have for this tutorial. But that being said, I do hope that you've enjoyed it or learned something new. And if you did, do feel free to show your support by leaving a like on the video, sharing it with your friends, or even subscribing to my channel. I upload 2 new filmmaking tutorials every single week. But that's all for now. Keep creating, and I'll see you in the next one.